Old Squad TV. I want to do this video based on Celtics media and why I feel like some of these so-called experts, and I'm not going to call them out in their channels and their media outlets, but a lot of these people always raise questions based on last year's team and try to subtract or try to like downplay the additions this team has made, the new coaching style, the new way of doing things, right? It's like they try to drain any type of excitement fans should have that this Celtics team could go somewhere this year. Are we going to win an NBA title? I think that's a long shot. Do I think we could get the Eastern Conference Finals? I think that's very doable. And here's why. This is why I have a problem with it. When some of these so called expert Celtics media outlets talk about the Celtics, it's always based on last year, and the additions we make are always based on last year's stats. So we really don't know where the Celtics are going to go this year. What I do know is that Al Horford, when he was here, was a really good player. Even that last year he was here, despite the season being so horrible, that was not of his fault. All right. Al Horford is a very capable former All Star who, at 35 years old, still has a lot left in his tank. If you don't think Al Horford doesn't have a lot left in his tank, you should go and watch last year's highlights for the 29 games he played before OKC told him to sit down. He averaged a career high 15 points a game. All right, so he's definitely got some left, and he looks in incredible shape. Now, look at all the other guys. Now, the questions have been, can Marcus Smart be an effective point guard, starting point guard? How will Ime do, and what will Ime do to install his offense, right, and his defense? What different schemes are going to have? And you guys always tend to look at last year's stats when it comes to the additions we made, like Josh Richardson, Enes Kanter. You got guys like Fernando Bruno. You got undrafted rookie, Sam Hauser. You got guys like Romeo Langford still on the roster. We don't know if he's even going to make the roster. Same with Grant. Hancho Hernan Gomez, who's a proven second unit guy, could play first unit. Obviously, a lot of other moves we made were really good moves. We are a very deep team. Our bench looks 10 times better than it did a year ago. You don't have guys that clog the lane like Tristan Thompson who can't do anything but a baby hook and dunk. You don't have Daniel Tice, who's just, is a decent shot blocker and an okay three-point shooter, but can't do anything else other than those two things. You got guys that are very much multi-purpose players. Let me make an example of what frustrates me. We'll look at a guy like Josh Richardson, right? And we'll look at a guy like Dennis Schroeder. We'll look at those two guys in general, right? We'll look at Schroeder and say, well, he turned down the whatever contract he turned down with the Lakers, and think that he's not good anymore. Like he's got to try to prove what he could prove in the regular season, so he could go and get a contract next year with somebody else. And you got guys like a guy like Josh Richardson who signed an extension with us after we got him in a trade. And you guys want to talk about how he's on the down part of his career because the last two seasons he shot 33 and 32% from three. You do know both seasons were cut short. I mean, one season was cut short due to the epidemic or the pandemic. And then last year, during the season, Richardson ended up having to miss games due to the pandemic. I cannot mention the word. You know how YouTube guidelines are. So I'm not mentioning that word. I don't want my video taken down. So we also got to understand it's a new system. So we don't know. We act like Josh Richardson has to shoot in order to be effective. Josh Richardson's an effective mid-range shooter. He's an effective slasher. He could pass the ball. He could dunk. All right. He could shoot the three when needed. You don't need him to shoot a whole bunch. You got guys like Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Naismith, Sam Hauser, possibly Garrison Matthews if he ever actually makes the team. You got guys that can shoot threes. on his team. Can't look at last year's stats and just think that, well, that's going to be how it's going to be this year. That's not how you forecast anything. You base all these things and you base on how Ime Udoka is going to use some of these guys. A guy like Josh Richardson might play much better in Ime's system than he did maybe in Rick Carlisle's system or in Brett Brown's system. All right. Now you look at Horford. We try to broadcast Horford and try to say, well, Horford's probably washed. Horford's not washed. On top of that, when you play the double big lineup, if you played Time Lord and Al Horford in that lineup, now you got to account for Al Horford's shooting, which allows for less double teams on Jason and Jalen. You also got to rely, now you can rely on posting Al Horford up against smaller matchups and smaller players in case certain matchups happen. To where Al wasn't able to do that in Philly, Ime's really made it a point and clear that he's going to try to use Al in mismatch problems. You're not going to be able to defend Al Horford in the post with a 6'5" small forward. You're just not going to be able to do it. And Al could shoot. So it's not like you could play small ball. All right. You got a guy like Canner. You guys sit there and say, well, Canner, we don't have to worry about Canner's minutes. He's not really going to contribute. Canner's been a double-double. He was a double-double last year for Portland. And for all the flack he gets as a perimeter defender, because he's not a great defender by any stretch of imagination, as a post defender, he's somewhat decent. Not great, he's somewhat decent. Bruno Fernando is a good player, young player, energy guy. The guy that's going to bring much energy at that backup power forward / center position. The guy that's going to really bring a lot of punch. A guy like Dennis Schroeder is going to bring a lot of energy off the bench. He's going to be a guy to get Dodo's alleys, Time Lord, or even Horford, because Horford still could get up every now and then. And I feel like we did a really good job building depth on this team. We're going to be a much better team because you're not going to be able, you can't double Jalen, you can't double Jason, and Jason and Jalen are not going to have to play one-on-one all the time. Since you guys like to complain about the lack of assists, who was making shots last year? No one. So outside of JT and JB, Pritchard maybe, but Pritchard wasn't getting a lot of minutes towards the end of the year, and he hit that rookie wall. He won't be hitting the rookie wall this year. So now we essentially go about 10 deep. On a 15-man roster, we go at least essentially 10 deep. Not a lot of teams have that depth, and you got a much better coach and a much more, probably not proven yet, because Brad is proven in this league despite being a college guy and a guy that runs a college system. Also, a new defensive scheme. You're not going to have a lot of switches the way you would have did had Brad still would have been a coach. You're going to have more man-to-man defense, which is a breath of fresh air because you only pull out the switches when needed. You don't want to switch all the time, because you're going to leave certain defenders out that are not great defenders on the team out to dry. Now, we have a lot of two-way players on our team, so that's good. Ultimately, at the end of the day, though, we're going to be a lot better. And the reason why I say this, I think we basically built our team to go against Brooklyn. That's the team that eliminated us. We got their assistant, who's our head coach now. We literally are building to go against Brooklyn. We might not beat them, but we're going to take them 6 or 7 with the way this roster, barring health issues, barring any epidemic or pandemic issues, we could take them 6 or 7. Might not win, but we go 6 or... I think that's a successful season for Boston, coming back from that bullshit season we had last year, to which I don't even want to remember. Aaron Naismith's potential is going to be seen this year. His hustle, his three-point shooting, his ability to score off the ball, you're going to start seeing a lot of that this year. So don't let these negative Nancy Boston media people try to tell you what's good and what's not. They trying to create narratives to make JB and JT look like they don't like each other, when it's clear as day that JB was babysitting JT's son last year and has babysitted him a lot. And Jalen opened a juice bar in Boston just, last night. And there's footage of JT visiting the juice bar during its opening. If they weren't so close, would they be doing that? Would they? Way to go for the Boston media to try to create narratives because they don't like anything positive in Boston when it comes to the media. Not the fans, but the fans need to be smart enough not to eat up into that. That said, I think I'm gonna make this prediction right now. Miami improved, but they're old. I think they're a little deficient in certain areas, and I think Jimmy's not Jimmy anymore. I think we're starting to see the back end of Jimmy's career. He might have some good games, but he's not. Jimmy was never really. He had that one season in Miami. He was never really a franchise guy. Let's really be honest about this man's career. He built himself up to be a second or third option. I think this is Bam's team. I think Kyle Lowry coming in is a good addition, but he's also aging. He's also aging. Philly's out the picture because you don't have Ben Simmons. I don't care what Philly does in a regular season. They're not going to be better than Boston because they don't have their additions. We're pretty much bringing the same team back, and you lost Dwight Howard. So now, essentially, you lose Dwight Howard, and Ben Simmons is going to be gone. Maybe you put Maxey at that point guard, but is he really a point guard? He's defensively a deficiency. Now you got to rely on Seth Curry, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, who's never really ever healthy. I don't like that. I don't like their odds. I think Miami and Philly cancel each other out. I think Milwaukee comes back down to earth after winning. I think we'll have a better record in Milwaukee. All right. I think them losing PJ Tucker is going to be a big deal. I think that's going to be huge. Obviously, coming back as the defending champion is going to be hard for them. I think we go ahead of them. Atlanta, I'm not sold on. I think Atlanta got lucky last year getting to the conference finals. They ran into a Philly team that had Ben Simmons, who was scared to death to shoot. Had Ben Simmons would have made at least 2 or 3 buckets, we're having a different discussion. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that Philly goes back down to like the 5th or 6th seed without Ben. Washington, Charlotte, and New York are going to be fighting for those 6th, 7th, 8th seeds. I'm not sold on the Knicks. I think the Knicks might beat us in that first game. Ultimately, you're talking about a long season. They're another team who basically aged. You got a guy like Kemba Walker who can't defend me, who has bad knees. And as much as I love Kemba, and I hate saying this about him, he's a small miniature guard who's probably not going to be starting. He's probably going to be coming off the bench. You're going to have a guy like, you're definitely going to have Derrick Rose ahead of him on the depth chart because Derrick's a lot more healthier. D Rose is nothing to play with. He's still a really good guard in this league. He can still make an all-star team. I think this will be a redemption season for him, just like he did last year. But I think the Knicks are going to have problems because I don't think you could rely on Evan Fournier to be your second or third scorer all the time. RJ Barrett, as great as he is and as great as he might be this year, he's going to be overshadowed by Julius Randle, and I think Julius Randle is still going to be their number one guy. Don't be surprised. I think the only way the Knicks jump up in that top 4, is if they were to trade Barrett, and maybe a couple other players they have for Damian Lillard. I think if they it's a different ball game if they get Lillard. Other than that, I think they're pretty much the same team as they were last year. They won 41 games. Nice surprise. They're not going to be catching teams by surprise this year. All right. Washington's a much better team than they were a year ago, but I still think there's anywhere from 5th to 7th or 8th seed. I think Charlotte's the same thing, 5th or 7th, 8th seed. So this is pretty much, to me, here's the top 3 in the East to me. You got Brooklyn, you got Boston, and then you got Milwaukee, then you got Atlanta. So that's 4. After that, it's a Miami and Philly cancel each other out. And then you got those last 2 spots anywhere for Charlotte, New York, or Washington to fight out. But I think ultimately, the Celtics win 50-plus games. I think Brooklyn wins 50-plus games unless Kyrie doesn't play. Brooklyn might not care. And the thing is, the reason why I might even put Boston ahead of them is because Brooklyn might not care about the regular season. KD might not play a lot of games in the regular season. Harden might not play a lot of games in the regular season. They could win being a second or third seed easily. Brooklyn's just that good. Even without Kyrie, they could win. They could literally get the second seed and be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not worried about Brooklyn. Milwaukee, I think it's going to be a very tired team. You could flip Milwaukee and Atlanta. Easy. Flip Milwaukee and Atlanta. You could possibly put Atlanta ahead of Milwaukee, but I think Boston's ahead of both those teams. And you're probably going to think, well, you sound like a homer. You sound like you're on drugs. But if you listen to all the additions we had, and you figure that we were just in the Eastern Conference Finals just 2 seasons ago, and in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 seasons before that, I don't see how we're not, unless health is not good for us, I don't see how we're not in the Eastern Conference Finals. Because the only reason we had a pretty bad, people forget we were the number 1 seed for a little part of last year until Kemba came back. And then when he came back, everything went down the hill. We lost Tristan to the pandemic. We lost a few other guys that have been, Tatum went out due to the pandemic. So again, I can't mention the C word. So what do you want me to do? I can't sit there. I know what we're capable of doing. And I think Ime is going to be a huge part. I think we're a deeper team. We're going to surprise a lot of people. I would not be surprised if we win 55 games, man. But if you think otherwise, you think I'm crazy, you think I'm smoking crack, or I'm just too much of a homer, hey, more power to you. I think based on what I know, and I know basketball very, very well, schematically, the changes we're going to make, I think that this team is going to be extremely tough to keep from that second seed. I think the highest ceiling will be first, only be the first seed. We've had worse teams be number 1. We had worse teams be the number 1 seed. Our team this year is a much better team than the teams that were number 1 seeds in the past. So I see this team being more close to that 2018 team. So I think we can either be 1 or 2. And I think after that, because Brooklyn might not care about the regular season, and neither will Milwaukee. Milwaukee might not care about the regular season either. So Atlanta probably could be either 2 or 3 after us. It could be interchangeable between Brooklyn, Boston, Atlanta, and Milwaukee. After that, I think Miami and Philly cancel each other out. And then everybody else is fending for themselves after. So you really can't base everything based on last season. A lot of teams that were bad last year, like Milwaukee, Miami was horrible last year. So was Boston, and a lot of both those teams were hit by injuries. You have injuries in the pandemic. You really can't discount that. It was a weird season. I thought us being 500 last year was just a really bad season. Just bad luck just happened. Bad coaching, horrible bench. Same thing in Miami, except the coaching wasn't bad. So, Gold Squad TV. Leave your comments down below. Subscribe. Leave a like. What do you think? Where do you think the Celtics, and where do you think they end up? If you think they're anything not like the opposite of what I think, then I think you guys are listening to way too much of these Celtics media people. Gold Squad TV.